Look at all that money, yeah, the money that they spend. Take another look and spend some time for him. Don't cut trees for paper, cause it hurts the environment. Stop deforestation, yes, it's time for him. Whoa, an acre of hemp makes 20 bales of oil. No need for pesticides to poison all our soil. People got no food, they got no clothes, they got no rent. Well, time for help! Yeah.
You are listening to Time for Hemp on Tumblr, on SoundCloud, on iTunes, and of course, iHeartRadio. We are a growing team of people who are dedicated to ending prohibition all around the world. It is Wednesday, and on Wednesday, we'd like to salute all the amazing people at Leap Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, and my joint host on Wednesdays is a hard-working Leap member, of course, who's been with Leap for, I think, about 9 years. He'll let me know here in a minute. Judge Lenny Frieling, Your Honor, thank you for taking Time for Hemp.
Casper, my pleasure. Thanks for having me, as always.
And how long have you been with Leap?
I've lost count. They contacted me. There was a gap in time. They recontacted me. Why don't we do it in terms of how many appearances, how many interviews, how many TV, radio, shows, podcasts? It sounds much longer than in years. It seems like at times about 100 years. In spirit, it's been since 1937, but I say in spirit because I just turned 64.
Wow. Well, I know there's a famous Beatles song by that name. And we have as our joint guest today, and don't forget, anytime you hear the word joint on the big broadcast, nearly 2.5 million people all around the world pack their bongs, their pipes, and their vaporizers. We have a member of our family here who's been showing up on the Time for Hemp Global Broadcasting Network for several years now. Every time she comes to the program, she brings a lot to the table. And we're talking about Dian Goldstein. Dian, thank you for taking Time for Hemp.
Always, Casper. You know, you're one of my favorite radio broadcasts, and I absolutely appreciate the ability to come on board. And I'd like to welcome Lenny on as the new joint host of Time for Hemp on Leap Wednesdays. Peter Christ left you some big shoes to fill, but I think you're going to be able to get very comfortable in those shoes.
My hope is that I can continue to roll along the way that Peter had for so long. Yeah,
absolutely. You know, it was very interesting. You know, you talk about how Leap, as much of a small nonprofit we have a huge international footprint now. And down here in Southern California where I live, I'm very active in doing guest lectures at universities. I get called in to all the major universities down here to do a drug policy and policing link. And it's the LEAP message as well. So a former professor of mine brought me into his drugs and society class yesterday. And I had a couple active duty police officers from Orange County that were completely engaged in the conversation, and although didn't necessarily agree with everything I said, absolutely supported the direction we're headed. And so I've seen really some tremendous change starting to come out of law enforcement. And what's interesting is our discussion, not just around the issues of marijuana, but on harm reduction and public health and alternatives to criminalization, I think is starting to pick up some great steam.
Dian, because some people may not be familiar with LEAP, we have two groups of members. We have our LEAP speakers, including you, including me, and then we have our LEAP supporters. Could you give our audience just a sense of what LEAP is?
Sure. So here's my whole elevator speech. Is for those who haven't heard about LEAP, is Law Enforcement Against Prohibition is a nonprofit educational organization that is made up of over 5,000 current, former, and retired criminal justice professionals. Out of all those members that are law enforcement specific or criminal justice specific, we have about 170 speakers across the world right now that literally do thousands and thousands of radio, TV, or in-person presentations. And in addition, LEAP has community supporters. And right now, I believe we're like at about 130,000 community supporters, and we are growing every day. But I think what's very interesting is how many criminal justice professionals are now finding us. We used to have to go out and find them. They're now coming our way.
So anyone can sign up at leap.cc as a supporter, correct?
Correct. And so I'm going to pitch, because we are a nonprofit and we are a very small nonprofit with regard to funding amongst the other drug policy reformers, is you can join LEAP and your membership. You can belong to LEAP without giving us any money, but we would encourage you to actually become a paid member. And what that does, it allows LEAP to get out in front of the public. So in California, for example, LEAP California members in particular are starting to address what we're going to do to saturate California in anticipation of our 2016 marijuana control and regulate ballot initiative. So your dollars help send us all sorts of places.
Now, while anyone can be a supporter, can sign up, can contribute financially, LEAP speakers have special required qualifications. What is your background, in a nutshell, that brings you here today as a LEAP speaker? So
I'm a retired lieutenant from a Southern California law enforcement agency, Redondo Beach, California. And I spent almost 22 years working everything from gangs and narcotics to patrol. So I retired as the first female lieutenant. And what brought me to LEAP was actually Judge Jim Gray, who is one of our notable LEAP speakers and the Libertarian vice presidential candidate a couple years ago with Gary Johnson. And during the Proposition 19 campaign, I went and heard Jim Gray debate the Garden Grove police chief. And I walked up and introduced myself and said, I totally support exactly what you guys are doing. And I was literally recruited to LEAP within a week and started speaking for the Prop 19 campaign.
Diane, one of the things that I do to prep for the show, and please don't tell anyone that I prepare for this, I rather have everyone to think I'm just that smart. Yeah. One of the things that I do is I Google, for example, your name. One of the things that I noted was that at page 8 of Googling your name was still popping up every line or every other line. So you've been out there in the LEAP trenches now as active or more active than even most of our speakers. Why are you doing that?
Well, so there's two things. So I was medically retired from law enforcement. And during my career, I also watched my brother, who had mental health issues and had a drug addiction. And I saw his battle literally during his entire life, and he ended up overdosing and dying. And so I saw both the professional side, where whatever we did from a law enforcement perspective did not help us manage America's drug use. It didn't help our communities. And at that same time, I had that personal experience of watching a loved one go through the criminal justice system and saw its failings and how it devastated our family. So I have a personal stake in this, that one of the things I don't want is to have other families continue to go through what I saw my mom go through and the pain of my brother's death.
And first, I'm sorry about hearing that about your brother. Was this a heroin death?
No, actually, it wasn't, which was really interesting, although it was a psychotropic and alcohol overdose. But so the long story short is one of his last drugs that he started using was, in fact, heroin. And then he ended up getting clean for a period of time, and then ended up somehow accidentally overdosing, which caused a heart attack, and he died.
When you go to the pharmacy and you bring in the prescription that the doctor has called in, and you're getting a drug made by Pfizer or Merck or one of the other major pharmaceutical manufacturers, how confident are you that you're getting what the drug purports to be?
Oh, of course we're getting what the drug purports to be, because there's adequate controls over manufacturing, production, and distribution. And I think that's the big issue that, I was in this class yesterday, and that was one of the questions. People think that heroin is dangerous, but if, in fact, we had the appropriate controls over processing and manufacturing, we would have a system like Switzerland does, or Portugal does, where they have had no deaths once they implemented a heroin-assisted medical treatment program. And so we know that control and regulation reduces death, disease, and addiction.
Is it fair to say that what we have, and am I being overdramatic when I say that heroin right now carries a random death penalty along with its street use?
No, you're not being overdramatic at all. And in fact, we have seen a huge increase in deaths in heroin in America in the last couple of years because of the OxyContin prescription issue. And so, we had all these issues with doctors overprescribing and the pill mills. And one of the things that happened is that the DEA cracked down on the distribution of OxyContin and other opioid drugs. But in doing so, they made treatment providers afraid to prescribe to people that really needed it. So those people are now going to the illicit market. And they can't afford the expense of an OxyContin pill. For one tablet right now, it's between $50 to $80, where you can get an adequate dose of heroin for $5 to $10, except for the purity level now has risen from 4%, roughly 20, 30 years ago, to about 60 to 70%. It's being cut with fentanyl. I mean, and you're right. It's like playing Russian roulette is exactly what it is.
Now, even with OxyContin, you're aware that the over-the-counter, legitimate, doctor-prescribed price of that is in the range of $10 a pill.
Correct.
So are we driving, and this is a softball, I admit it, are we driving people to the streets to get heroin if their insurance company is not paying the $500, $600, $700 a month for the legitimate prescription?
Oh, absolutely. And interesting because, you can start talking about economics. One of the things, let's tie in the Mexican cartels right now to our rising heroin issue. And one of the reasons why is after we control, regulated, and taxed in Colorado and in Washington, we've seen the above-regulated marijuana market has taken a large hit to the Mexican cartels, as we predicted. And so one of the things that they did is they recognized that it was going to be too expensive to import their product. So they are no longer growing marijuana in Mexico. They are now growing opium poppies. And the Mexican cartels have saturated the drug market because they recognized exactly what the DEA was doing with the pill mill issue and the restricting of prescription drugs.
You were a lieutenant commander for over 20. You were in law enforcement, ending as a lieutenant commander for over 21 years. During that period of service, did you run into a single street drug dealer that asked anyone for proof of age?
Oh, absolutely not. It makes it worse is because no matter how many street drug dealers we took off the street, 10 more would just pop up. We always, discuss it as drug lord whack-a-mole. And at the low value level, it's just, street level whack-a-mole. And I think, our emphasis on drug market enforcement is really taking its toll right now on the overarching goals of what law enforcement should be. It really has changed our mission, and you see it reflected in not necessarily the lowest level of crime that we currently have, but that we're solving less crimes than we used to do.
Now, when you say we're solving less crimes than we used to, are you referring to any particular crimes that are being neglected?
Oh, absolutely. So for our listeners, is when the drug war started, if you went back to what is called the crime clearance rate, which most law enforcement agencies don't necessarily promote with their crime clearance rate. You really have to be kind of wonky and you go into the FBI database. But before the drug war started, we were solving 8 to 9 out of 10 murders. We were solving 7 or 8 out of 10 rapes. We were solving more robberies, more burglaries, every single part 1 crime. We had a higher rate of clearing cases and convicting people. Currently, right now, we only solve 6 to 7 out of 10 murders. We only solve about 6 out of 10 rapes. We only solve 3 out of 10 robberies and 1 out of 10 property crimes. And so, go ahead, Lenny.
No, please.
No, and so one of the tie-ins that people don't talk about, except we do on a regular basis, is the best example is think back on our rape kit scandal that occurred in the last year. I don't know if you saw the CNN special, Lenny, that Anderson Cooper did, where sitting in law enforcement evidence lockers, we had 400,000 untested rape kits. Not going back a year or 2 years. We're talking going back decades. And Anderson Cooper did a really good job about talking about some of the policy and the funding issues and maybe why some of these things happen. But what he didn't link in is the connection with the number of arrests for drug use with why we're not doing it. So what most folks don't understand, and Lenny, as a judge, you get to put on your attorney and your judiciary hat here, is in order to file a case, for example, for the last few years, we've arrested somewhere between 1.4 to 1.5 million people for drugs every year in our country. At the felony level, at the misdemeanor level, with some exceptions for marijuana, where places like California, it's an infraction and you're not testing pot unless someone contests the citation, is you must send that sample to the crime lab in order to file a criminal case. And so we simply overwhelm our law enforcement resources by emphasizing those low-value possession arrests.
We've been building, as science progresses, as the laws change, we've been building a database of DNA for different people, correct?
Yes, we have.
And so if we have a rape kit and we test it, we may very well identify a rapist or a serial rapist, correct?
Correct.
And if the rape kits are sitting on a shelf in a property room, in an evidence room, locked up, and talk about a softball, how many arrests will that lead to?
Yeah, 0. Yeah. And you know what's really interesting? Because in Detroit, that was one of the places that had the worst issues relative to this whole rape kit. Is the federal government last year, because we had congressional hearings surrounding this issue, and they poured, I can't even begin to tell you how much money. I want to say it was like $100 million to help law enforcement out of this mess. And in Detroit, since they started testing their backlogs, they have connected a number of serial rapists. Some of them are sitting in prison, some of them are not. And so, again, it's we as Americans have to demand that our government prioritize the most violent crimes and make drug offenses the lowest level priority.
Does the illegality of the drugs, the forcing of the drugs into this underground market, did you see any impact of that directly on what the cost of the drugs were to the street user?
Oh, absolutely not. And currently today is, the DEA basically talks about how successful they are in helping us, become a drug-free society. And if you look at the metrics of success that they're using, they're inaccurate. They're saying they're successful because they're taking more money and more guns and more dope. But yet we know that economics tells us that right now is all drugs are the cheapest that they've been at the highest purity level. And if in fact prohibition was working, it would be the complete opposite.
If prohibition were working, one would anticipate it would be harder to find drugs on the street. They wouldn't be as plentiful. Did you ever run into a situation where a street user couldn't get drugs, where the street ran heroin, ran out of methamphetamine?
Absolutely not. And, it's really interesting. Let's talk about, substance, the availability of illicit substance at whether it's our prisons or our high schools. Okay. So I was a school resource officer for 4 years. And the first year that I was there, they ran a undercover drug operation and brought in 2 undercover officers from the LA County Sheriff's Department. Didn't tell me, which I was really mad, because you talk about developing a dangerous situation on your campus when you don't know you have undercover officers there. But they did this whole big, this was back in the 1990s, and, we made CNN, and this was, one of the most highly successful undercover sting operations on a high school campus. Within 2 weeks, I had kids back on my campus selling anything that they wanted. And so on the larger scale, let's take a look at our prisons. Is any drug in our prison system is available, just like any drug is available on our high school campuses. And if we can't keep them out of those 2 places, that's really a significant sign of the failure of the drug war.
Well, one thing I am a failure at is going to break on time, but I was so wrapped up in your content that I just didn't want to take a commercial break. But we're going to do that now and listen to a song about how fantastic marijuana is, and then we're going to pick up where we left off here at Time for Hemp. You are listening to the Time for Hemp Global Broadcasting Network. Please share us with your friends.
THCF Medical Clinics are the premier physicians clinic in the United States. THCF has offices all across the United States from Hawaii to Michigan. THCF Medical Clinics has helped approximately 150,000 patients obtain their medical marijuana permits to legally possess, grow, and use medical marijuana. If you have chronic pain, multiple sclerosis, or any other neurological degenerative disease, or if you have any gastrointestinal disorders such as GERD, irritable bowel syndrome, or if you have AIDS, cancer, spastic disorders, seizure disorders, or glaucoma, call us at 1-800-723-0188 or visit us online at hemp.org. Again, the number is 1-800-723-0188 and the site is hemp.org.
I smoke marijuana, yeah. And in the evening time, when I'm alone, I smoke marijuana, yeah. Oh, marijuana. Oh, marijuana, yeah. Oh, I got my ganja. Like a rasta, yeah. In the morning light, I lie awake. I smoke marijuana, yeah. And by the afternoon, I am stoned. Oh, marijuana, yeah. Oh, marijuana, marijuana.
That weed out the bag, sprinkle it slow, cross the zigzag, hold it up, roll it up, tighter and tighter, grab your lighter, flick it, pull the smoke, be cool, don't show, let it out, that's what getting hot is all about. Look through the bottoms of your eyelids, feel like you did when you was a little kid, happy, positive and mellow, spreading love on to the next fella. Oh, lady, I look like I'm shady, cause my eyes are redder than Grady. You know the boys from my neighborhood, we look real bad, but we feel so good.
And if I'm old and gray, and I live alone,
what you gon' do, homeboy?
I smoke marijuana.
I'ma be right there with you, come on.
And in my garden, I will grow my own.
You gon' grow it? Hey.
Marijuana.
Sing it, come on.
Oh, marijuana.
Hey, speaking of which.
Oh, marijuana.
Can you pass that over here, please?
Oh, I got my ganja.
I'm about to get my ganja. Yeah.
Dread like a rasta. Like a rasta.
Come on.
Oh, I got my ganja.
I'm finna get the blunt. Yeah, man.
Dread like a rasta.
Let me hit it one time.
Oh, how I wish I was in Jamaica.
Hey, we can go there.
We dress like a rasta.
Yeah, man. I got my ganja.
Dread like a rasta.
What's up? Yeah.
Marijuana. Burning up, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do. I really do. I smoke like a rock star. I know. I smoked out with Willie Nelson, and he even told me I smoke more than he does. So, hey, what can I say? I know how to pack a bowl. And that was one of my favorite songs. And when I was listening to that, I was up dancing around the house with the dogs and waving my hands in the air and smoking marijuana. It is Wednesday. And on Wednesday, we salute all the amazing people at LEAP, Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. If you're looking for ways to help encourage the community that you live in to change their minds about the horrific policies that are brought on by this horrible war on drugs and prohibition, I would encourage you to go to leap.cc. Find yourself a great speaker to bring them to your neck of the woods. With that said, I'm going to pass this joint conversation back to my joint friends while I enjoy my joint on the Big Joint broadcast here at Time for Hemp. Yonner?
Casper, I have to say, I think our show today is just smoking. I love that.
I love the puns.
I am happy to say that I am coming to you from the free state of Colorado, and Dian Goldstein is coming to you from the free state of California. Dian, you're a student of this battle, of this prohibition. Have you seen that the sky has fallen in Colorado or California?
No, it's really interesting because as a woman, I'm a wonderful multitasker. And as we've been sitting here talking, my email is coming in with articles that people send me or listserv that I belong to. And it's everything from, harm reduction listserv to, marijuana legalization listserv. And I just got a great article that came out of the Washington Post that talks about Colorado's legal cannabis market. They predict will be $1 billion by 2016. So in 2014, the state has released their report. Legal marijuana was a $700 million industry in Colorado last year, and yet the sky didn't fall. Crime rates didn't go up, DUIs didn't go up. There's been a couple blips, but as an emerging industry, I think what's critically important to talk about that is that the state of Colorado, as they implemented and realized where the blips were, is revamped, policies and law relative to recalls, relative to edibles. And they're doing, I think, a very, very good job of what the industry will look like in the future.
Give thanks and praise to Most High Jah Rastafari. We are now seeing the Bob Marley brand of marijuana. And what could be more American than capitalism? And as I only half joke, we're not communists. We're capitalists.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there.
I multitask also. I manage to breathe and talk almost at the same time. Let me ask you this. The word 40 years as this war, 40 years as how long the war has been, wouldn't it be more fair to say that although the late President Nixon, who I admit, I hate to speak ill of the dead and I hate to speak ill of the living, but he was a man I truly detested. His contribution was to name this the war on drugs. Wouldn't it be more accurate to say that the failed attempt at prohibition has been going on since 1937?
At least with marijuana, but let's go back even further. Let's go to 1914 and the Harrison Tax Act, which really criminalized opioids and started punishing doctors for providing good health treatment for drug addicts. Is this, and it's funny because last night when I was having this guest lecture, is one of the things I pointed out to the two police officers, and they basically agreed, is that law enforcement has done a very poor job of educating to historical context of the drug war. So we'll go back to 1970 with Richard Nixon, but there is no law enforcement curriculum that I've ever been part of that talks about the war on drugs, not as a war on drugs, but really a war on who was using drugs back then. And so then you see the implementation of structural racism within a system. And so we need to do a better job of educating our police officers by putting out that inflammatory language that's in the congressional record, by pointing out the fallacies of Harry Anslinger and the moral view that we take on drug use in America.
And, of course, we have William Randolph Hearst, who managed to get people so politically, emotionally motivated that we banned the production of rope in the United States.
Yeah.
And almost lost World War II because we banned rope.
Yeah. You know what's really interesting, because I'm in California, and so I was at this international business conference, and ironically, one of the best cannabis publications is called Smell the Truth. And the guy who started Smell the Truth is part of the Hearst Corporation. And he did a panel that he kind of laughed and talked about it. You know, it's ironic that we've come full circle that a Hearst publication is now supporting the coverage of medical marijuana use and the cannabis industry. And so, you know, I think that what I hope is Randolph Hearst is rolling in his grave right now.
What a pleasant thought. So we've talked about how you can't have a war on drugs, but we have our own government fighting a war against our own people, sending them to prison. And I have to ask this. How is rehabilitation for an addiction in prison?
Oh, there is none. And so here's, I think, the greater issue that because this whole issue ties into so many different things. So, for example, I think that the war on drugs has done a very poor job of filtering out the people who use illicit drugs or any drugs in a non-problematic manner. You know, have you read Dr. Carl Hart's book, Lenny?
I have not.
Oh, you got to pick it up. So,
please repeat the name.
It's called High Price, and it's Dr. Carl Hart. He's a board member for the Drug Policy Alliance. He's an African-American neuroscientist who has done some of the leading research relative to the issues on how drugs, are they really addictive? And his research out of Columbia University, where they actually used people to determine how addictive, you know, cocaine or crack cocaine or methamphetamine was, is his peer-reviewed research by a neuroscientist basically states that 80 to 90% of all illicit drug use is non-problematic. Think about that. Really, only 10 to 20% of people use drugs in a problematic fashion. And in fact, other addiction research shows most people use drugs in a non-problematic way, or if they have peaks and valleys where they abuse drugs, they actually are able to cure themselves without 12-step programs or course of rehabilitation. And so we are pouring something like $55 billion a year into a drug war that is focused on 80 to 90% of the people that don't have a problem in our society. So I propose that we take all that money for the drug war and actually use it to do front-end prevention, job training, rehabilitation that is not on a coercive or based on a zero-tolerance model. And we would get more bang for our buck in that fashion.
One of the things that I keep repeating, because I think it's so important, is that while we can cure an addiction, we cannot cure a conviction.
Absolutely.
is there a racial aspect that you are seeing to the pattern of arrests, the pattern of prosecutions?
Oh, absolutely. We know that, and you've seen it, is law enforcement polices downtown Denver differently than what's a high-end suburb in Colorado, Golden or something like that. Is law enforcement polices different based on the economics of neighborhoods. And, and what that does is, law enforcement, and I think this is the discussion, what comes to, are we racist or are we not racist? No, we have been given tools and we don't think past solving a problem in the short term. And that's what has to change.
As a school resource officer, based on what you are seeing, is there any truth to what I've heard that it is easier to get drugs, including marijuana, than it is to get cigarettes or alcohol?
Oh, absolutely. We've all, Lenny, you had kids, right? Did you ever do this experiment? When my son was in high school, and we live in this very affluent area of Orange County, it's a very interesting neighborhood. It's, everything from, lower middle class, Hispanic, barrio to multi-million-dollar homes. And the high school where he attended was a great high school. And I would always do the experiment. I'd have the basketball team over and go, hey, if I give you guys $20, what can you guys bring me back? Nobody ever said, unless there was someone that was 18, well, we can bring you cigarettes, but it's because I'm 18. But no one ever said, oh, we can go get beer or alcohol. What they said is, well, we could go spot and co-opt an adult to get us alcohol. But I can come back in 20 minutes with pot, and if you want something harder, it may take me a little bit, maybe an hour.
So what we're seeing there is that regulation has an impact on accessibility. It doesn't increase it, it decreases it for younger people.
Yes, absolutely. And, we're seeing, it's really interesting, the things, other than Kevin Sabat, who is the only person who's screaming, the sky is falling, is if you really look at all the reports that are coming out of like Colorado or California or other places that have, a medical marijuana initiative or an adult consumption, is the statistics on our kids smoking marijuana, there's really no bump one way or the other. And although adults are starting maybe to, because they've been destigmatized, they don't have to hide in the closet anymore. I think that what we're showing is that, they're through an adult consumption market like Colorado's done or like Washington's done and other places are going to do, we can show that there are things that kids shouldn't do and things that adults are entitled to do if they so choose and they're responsible.
Well, one thing I have to be entitled to do, and that is to take a commercial break so we can pay our bills. And I'm going to take the opportunity to take on my entitlement now. And then we're going to come back and pick up where we left off here at Time for Hemp. Listening to the Time for Hemp Global Broadcasting Network. Please share us with your friends.
Serious Seeds is your source for quality cannabis and sativa seeds. Serious Seeds are the creators of legendary strains like AK-47, Bubblegum, Chronic, Cali Mist, and White Russian. The AK-47 is probably the most awarded strain on the planet. The high THC content of AK-47 makes it the perfect medical strain. For patients seeking quick pain relief, Cali Mist is an almost pure sativa. Female medical cannabis patients have reported that this strain helps relieve menstrual cramps. Serious Seeds just acquired another Dutch high-quality seed bank, Magus Genetics. From now on, Serious Seeds can offer you even more award-winning strains. The fine folks at Serious Seeds strive to breed the best cannabis genetics that they can find, so patients can rely on the effectiveness of their medicine. Go to SeriousSeeds.com to grow your medicine. That site again is SeriousSeeds.com.
Yeah, stay alert with consciousness and be responsible. That's what we want everybody to be. For God's sake, do not smoke a half a bag of great kush and then climb onto a bus and drive my family and friends across town, or get into a cockpit of an airplane and fly people across the country. Goodness gracious, no, be responsible. If you're going to smoke a half a bag of kush, the only thing I want to see you go to is the refrigerator to get some munchies. With that said, I'm going to pass this conversation back to my joint host and our joint guests, so all of our joint conversations can be enjoyed by our joint audience while I smoke my joint here. Oh, God. Whew. I had time for hemp.
Diane, is it fair to say that we should be concerned about people driving impaired by any substance, by being tired, as opposed to focusing on marijuana, for example?
So there's a couple things that's really interesting. That the National Highway Transportation and Safety Association just came out with their first study that they did, both a control group and what they did is they analyzed, I think it was something like 3,000 accidents of drivers that were impaired versus 6,000 accidents of drivers that they weren't. And what they saw with marijuana, it continues to be alcohol and other factors that provide a higher risk of being involved in car crashes, and that marijuana, if you took out the age and the gender, kind of that male thing between certain ages, that the crash risk for marijuana was actually fairly low.
And when you say National Highway Traffic Safety, you're referring to what we sometimes call NHTSA, correct?
Correct.
And that is a government agency. So we're talking about government numbers, not numbers published by sources that we would all consider to be pro-legalization, whether it's marijuana or all substances.
No, absolutely. And so, the other numbers that they put out is every state works. Every state has their own Office of Traffic Safety. And that feeds off and works with with NHTSA. And one of the things that I think is so fascinating is if you go into NHTSA and your own traffic safety in the state, is you can pull up what's called the mileage death rate for our highways. And California, who has had medical marijuana for the longest time since 1996, and really in a very unregulated fashion. And we still have no per se limits because we continue to be able to oppose and kill bills that put per se limits in there. Is California once again this year has had one of the lowest mileage death rates in the nation as a comparison. And this year we were, the second lowest in our history. And so, the whole scare tactics and the fear and rhetoric that law enforcement and anti-prohibitionists have said there's going to be blood and carnage on the highway and, the sky is falling has not, in fact, happened. But I'm not here to tell you that anyone should smoke a joint and get in a car and drive. But what I'm saying is, from a risk factor, you have a less risk of getting involved in a car accident. But I would also say you shouldn't get in a car and a drive if you're taking an OxyContin or a Percocet or alcohol. And so we have to continue to, as drug policy reformers, is emphasize responsible use. We have to engage in our own campaign to properly educate our kids about the dangers of all drugs and how really the thing that causes more accidents is polydrug combination. If it's just marijuana, you're a different risk factor. But if you combine it with alcohol, it's very, very dangerous situation.
I love an excuse to use the word, well, I guess I don't love the word enough to bring it to mind. Let me ask this. We know that prohibition has been attempted since 1914. If we gave it 2 more years, 5 more years, 20 more years, do we have any reason to believe that that would lead to success of prohibition?
No, absolutely not. You know, we have done the same thing now for 100 years. Okay. This started in 1914. It's now 2015. We're going on 101 years of prohibition. And what we have to do is do something different. And I think that's the interesting conversation, because I'm doing a lot of work outside of marijuana, Your Honor and Peter. You know, it's ironic that the crisis in heroin is pushing law enforcement to support harm reduction strategies and tying law enforcement policies in with positive public health outcomes. I do a lot of writing. I do a lot of blogging. And, you know, there's a couple notable programs right now out of King County, Washington. Is you have the Law Enforcement Assisted Diversion Program. That is a wraparound service program that at the point of arresting a drug offender, they don't even bring them to jail. They give them they give them a choice. If you want to go to jail, we'll book you for this low-level drug possession offense. But if you don't want to go to jail, we have all these services available for you to help get you out of your addiction.
Well, one thing I got to help get us out of is this hour. We are down to the last couple of minutes. So I would encourage you to put a big shout out to your favorite URLs and organizations, starting with Dian.
So as much as I love my LEAP partners, that's my first and primary, I would like to give out a shout out to our Moms of Cops Alliance. Moms United to End the War on Drugs. You can Google them. If you are a mom or another, you can come join an amazing group of men and women who don't use drugs, who maybe are patients, but who have all lost children to the criminalization of their drug addiction, whether through prison or death. And I'm working hard to take these moms places so we have the power of women, the moral imperative. Just like women ended alcohol prohibition, it's women that are going to end drug prohibition as well, with the help of you guys.
There you go. And Your Honor?
One of the things we saw in Colorado, one of the things that led to victory, is the cooperation of NORML, NORML.org, SSDP, Students for Sensible Drug Policy, LEAP.cc. It takes the cooperation of groups that agree on some issues and not on other issues. We have mothers uniting. And why are they uniting? They're not uniting to hurt their children. They're uniting to protect their children. So the more shout-outs we can give to the maximum number of groups, of organizations that are pushing in the same direction, in overlapping, in similar directions, the better.
And I do want to remind people that we are no longer just a 1-hour broadcast, but a group of people. We are a growing team that are dedicated to ending prohibition all around the world. If you could be nice enough to please share us with your friends. Don't forget, we've got a Google app. You can download into your Android devices. We'll have one soon for the Apple phones and the Apple tablets. Apple doesn't seem to like the marijuana movement and announced about a week and a half ago that they're now allowing marijuana apps into the iTunes store, which is weird because there's already about 100 in there now. But anyway, we'll be getting ours up in there soon, and of course we're going to be expanding into the Roku network. And we have, like I said, a lot of hosts on the broadcast that are working to end prohibition, making a point to tune in, find out what they have to share. Lots of great music. And as always, please share us with your friends. And know that the next time you hear me, you'll know that it's time for hemp.
Look at all that money. Yeah, the money that they spent. Take another look now and take some time for hemp. Don't cut trees for paper, cause it hurts the environment. Stop deforestation, yeah, it's time for hemp. Oh, an acre of hemp makes 20 barrels of oil. No need for pesticides to poison all our soil. People got no food, they got no clothes, they got no rest. Right now